Our first session this morning is a keynote conversation. It is entitled Reverse Engineering the Brain for Intelligent Machines. We have a treat ahead of us. Jeff Hawkins and Subutai Ahmad are on a mission to reverse engineer the brain. In this session, they're going to discuss how tackling this scientific challenge, the progress they are making, and why brain theory is necessary to truly and create truly intelligent machines. Jeff is class of 79. He's co-founder of Numenta, and I just learned earlier today that he's also the parent of a Cornellian class of 2012. Subutai is class of 1986, the parent of a Cornellian class of 2014, and he's vice president of research at Numenta. Jeff fondly remembers his time studying in Andrew Dickson White Library, feeling a physical connection with the beginnings of Cornell, its founders, and the intellectual accomplishments of humanity. When not at work, Jeff can be found sailing on the San Francisco Bay in his gaff-rigged schooner. Subutai admits to borrowing trays from the Cornell cafeteria and sledding down Line Slope after the first big snowfall each season. Who of us can't relate to that? With a major in computer sciences and a minor in cognitive psychology, he is thankful to Cornell for the freedom to explore an interdisciplinary curriculum which kick-started his lifelong passion for understanding the brain. Please join me in welcoming Jeff and Subutai.
I'm going to put my brain someplace here. How about right there? Can I balance that? Is that going to work? There we go.
Actually, bring yours here, too.
What's that? Well, you know, I can refer to it, perhaps, over there. So thank you, Becky. That's a nice introduction. And thanks, for everyone, for being here.
Yeah. Thank you. It's really a pleasure for me to be here. It's an honor. Cornell is really where I really kick-started my passion for understanding how the brain works, so it's particularly an honor to be here.
Yeah. And we're going to try to do something, it's a little awkward. We were supposed to be, interviewing ourselves, but Subutai and I have been working together now for, 12 years?
Yeah.
We're a very, very close collaboration. We sit right near each other. We have a small business, Numenta, which is about 15 employees, full-time employees. We swell in the summer when we have interns and visiting scholars. But we also have a fair number of Cornellians. Our director of engineering is also a Cornellian. And we've had a number of interns over the years.
A whole bunch of interns.
Yeah, I don't know why that is.
Cornell,
we don't go out of our way to do that. We're not like a Cornell hiring shop, but somehow they find us. So that works pretty well. So should we delve into it?
Yeah.
Okay, so how do we want to start here?
So I think you're going to talk about neuroscience and what we're trying to do, what we're trying to achieve at Numenta.
Yeah. So I'll start off with what the big goal and the big picture here is. And we are going to have time for questions at the end, so you better pay attention to those complicated instructions on how to ask us questions, because apparently we're not allowed to take them any other way. So start thinking about that. Look, Subutai, he's had a long interest in lifelong learning and how the brain works. I, too, I didn't really fall in love with brains until right after I graduated. It was the fall of '79. But I decided at that time that I wanted to really dedicate my life to figuring out how the brain works. It took a long time to get to a position to do that. But we think we're working on one of the most interesting and important problems ever about anything. I mean, if you think about our species, the human species, we're unique and really in one way, is that we have a unique brain. Otherwise, we're kind of not very interesting animals. But we have an intelligent brain, more so than other animals. And the whole nature of our success and our lives and our social structures are the knowledge, even that the very notion of knowledge can't exist outside of the framework of the brain. And so if we want to understand what life is about and what the universe is about and what we as species are about, there is no more central question than what does the brain do and how does it do it? And so that we have a once in a forever opportunity to figure that out. It's going to happen once, and it's only going to happen once. And intelligent species can do it, and so what the hell? Let's go for it. And that's what we do. We think it's going to have a lot of, by the way, this is not this pie in the sky stuff. This is actually happening. It's going to happen. It's in the middle of it. It's actually happening right now. So it's not like, oh, we hope to do this. We're doing it. It's going to have a lot of impacts. If you think about our world is, we spend so much time educating our children, but we actually don't know how we learn. We don't know how, well, we're starting to learn how it is we form memories and how it is that the structures of the brain actually do this, and so it can inform pedagogy. We have a whole series of issues related to psychology and neurology, which can be impacted by knowledge about how the brain works. It is purely, of course, it's purely interesting on a pure scientific and philosophical point of view, just knowing how it works. But also, we also believe that there is going to be a very, very important and a large industry and impactful on our societies about building intelligent machines. And we don't believe you can build intelligent machines unless you understand how the brain works. So much of what you hear about an AI today is not really about intelligence. It's nothing really at all like what brains do. And so we're trying to get to the core of that, the core principles about how brains work, and that's going to inform the future of AI, or we prefer to say machine intelligence. And if you're worrying about this, it's nothing to worry about. We can talk about that too. The risks of this are not what you've heard about if you've heard about the existential threat of this. Anyway, so that's what motivates us. I think everyone who works at Numenta is deeply, passionately interested in this topic. We think it's important to work on. It's exciting to work on. It's fun to understand. I wish you all knew what I knew because it's fun and interesting. So we'll be able to share a little bit of that today, just a little bit of it. I should mention before I turn it over to Subutai, the next thing, that everything we do is open as a business. So all of our research, all of our code, everything we do, it's not easy necessarily to follow, but if you're really interested in what we're doing, you can go to our website and you can learn about all of it in detail. There's nothing secretive going on here. But I think what might be useful now is for Subutai just to chat a little bit about, he's in charge of all of our research, and to chat a bit about the state of where we are, what have we known, what have we figured out, what are some of the remaining challenges to go through. Are you ready to do that?
Yeah, definitely.
Thanks, Jeff. We were going to have some amazing slides, but we came too late. They couldn't accommodate them. So you just have to imagine how amazing it is.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. So I'll try to give you a little bit of a feel for kind of the state of neuroscience and how we go about thinking about this, and what does it even mean to have a theory of intelligence that's sort of based on neuroscience. So I don't know how much you guys know about neuroscience, but the field is absolutely exploding. It's amazing the innovation that's going on in the research there. There's somewhere around, I think, about 50,000 neuroscientists in the world doing research in there, so it's a pretty large field worldwide. But the sort of set of recording techniques and the technology they have for measuring neurons and the chemicals and everything that's going on in the brain is just exploding.
Yeah, we'll interrupt each other here, just make it more interesting. There's the annual the Society for Neuroscience conference. There's many neuroscience conferences, but the big one, they have over 30,000 neuroscientists go to it every year. I mean, it's huge. That's just in the United States.
Yeah, I think it takes like 15 minutes just to walk from one end of the hallway to the other. Forget about actually reading all the posters. But yeah, so the field is exploding. It's almost like there's a Moore's law in neuroscience. It's not unusual today for researchers in the field to be recording from, say, let's say 1,000 neurons in awake, live, behaving animals. So they can actually give these animals tasks and see what's happening and look at the neural responses and try to get patterns. There are several labs that are close to being able to record from an entire animal, basically some species of fish, being able to record every single neuron in that fish while the fish is swimming in 3D and being able to visualize it live. I mean, it's just unprecedented what's going on. And this kind of advance would have been unthinkable, I think, even 10 years ago. But although I think where we come in is, although there's a lot of data, there's actually surprisingly very few theories of how the brain actually works. What is the actual functionality behind these things? And I think we've learned a bunch of things from speaking with neuroscientists and working on our modeling that I'd like to kind of share a little bit with you. So one of the things we've learned is that the model of how you think about a neuron is really important. So if you look at most machine learning and deep learning technologies, they have a very, very simplistic view of what a neuron is. Their view is sort of it just takes a bunch of numbers, add them up, and then sends some signal. Well, real neurons are a lot more complicated than that. They have a beautiful structure to them. There are specific sets, locations that they get input into the neuron, the specific areas that they send output. There's temporal dynamics in the neuron that are really important. And it turns out that if you really study that and understand that, it tells you a lot about how the brain learns, how we deal with temporal structure and streaming information, how we behave, how we send out motor commands and so on. There's a lot of detail in the kind of the structure of neurons that's actually important to model. And most of the machine learning stuff today completely ignores that stuff to its disservice, we think. So that's one thing I think we've learned. The second thing that we've learned is sort of the opposite, is that much of the complexity around brains, and if you look at neuroscience textbooks, you'll see these extremely complicated diagrams of all of the regions of the brain and how they're hooked up and how every region is doing some specific function or the other. And it turns out that you can actually ignore a lot of that complexity. There's a commonality and a common structure across all of the neocortex. And if you just focus on those common principles, you can actually reduce the problem to a much more simpler problem and just focus on that.
Would this be a good time to show some props? And
Absolutely.
I'll just illustrate that. So if you think about your brain, this is a model of a human brain. And if you think about it, there's actually about 75% of the volume of the brain is this thing on top, the neocortex. And that's the thing that's unique to mammals, and that's the thing that makes us smart. So we're interested mostly in the neocortex. We have to understand how it relates to other things. And if you could take this neocortex, which is all wrinkly like this, and if you could lay it flat and iron it out, it'd be just like this. This is my favorite prop. It's about this thick. It's only a couple millimeters thick, and it's about this big an area. So it just gets all scrunched up to get inside. And so this is you, right? This is it. There's something around 30 billion neurons in here, and I'm not joking. This is it. This is you, and this mind's speaking right now, and yours is listening. But the amazing thing, what Subutai was just talking about, there's these different regions. This region does language, this region does vision, this region, there's like 100 different regions here. But what Subutai was referring to is if you slice through that 2 millimeter thickness, you see this very complex structure of cell types and layers and connectivity. But it's the same everywhere. It's almost identical everywhere. It's also true across species. So if you took a mouse's neocortex and sliced through it, you can't tell it's not as a mouse versus a human. It's almost identical. But it's detailed. So our goal, and what Subutai is referring to, is what we're really trying to figure out is what is that common structure doing that exists everywhere in the cortex, if you slice it everywhere. Because if you understand how vision works, you understand how touch works and how hearing works and how language works. It's hard to believe, but that's true. It's a very interesting, complex, repetitive sort of learning algorithm.
Yeah, I think it's often hear it said that vision is done in this part of the brain and language is done in this part of the brain and audio is this part. But I think if you take a slice of your cortex and show it to a neuroscientist, they won't be able to tell you where it's from.
Yeah.
You can't actually tell by looking at it. The only reason the visual part of your brain is visual is just because it happens to get input from your retina and happens to process visual information. So it's a pretty striking.
Yeah, and they've shown that if you can route the senses, the data coming from your skin into a visual part of the brain. They don't do this with humans, but they've done it with some other animals. That part of the brain takes over a different meaning. So we're looking for this sort of uber common algorithms that are applying across all aspects of intelligence, and that's what we're making progress in understanding. All right,
yeah,
so that's a little side. I figure I have to use my props here, so.
Yeah. So I think that's actually, as modelers and computer scientists, it makes our job much, much simpler. It just says we can ignore much of the complexity and sort of blur eyes and focus on the commonalities and the common principles. And there's a lot that we've learned on that. I think we're making really good progress on that. I go to neuroscience conferences all the time and just talk with experimental neuroscientists, and there's starting to be, I think, a common understanding of the theory of how the brain works and and where we go from there. So we're making really good progress on that. Over the last few years, we really, I think, started to understand how the brain processes temporal information, how it takes in streaming sensory information and makes predictions. So that's a core piece of what the brain is doing. And some of the new stuff that we're working on, maybe you want to expand on that, is we're really starting to figure out how the brain generates behavior and how it sort of deals with constantly changing information.
Yeah, it's a problem. I'm so tempted to go into detail here that some people would want to hear and other people are like, what the hell is he talking about? I mean, just to give you a sense, what we do here, we actually are modeling large structures of real complex neurons. In our business, in our lab, we model the networks of hundreds of thousands of very complex neurons in structures as they exist in the neocortex. And that's what we do. And so we're getting a deep understanding exactly how some of this tissue works, not just a fuzzy understanding, a very, very detailed understanding about it. We had a real breakthrough this last year, which I'll mention. We were asking ourselves, there's a thing called sensory motor inference, which is like mostly, you're not aware of this, but most of the way you learn about the world is through movement. You're constantly moving. To learn what something feels like, you have to move your hands over it. To learn what a building is or a structure, you have to walk through it. Even when you're just sitting here looking at us, your eyes are constantly moving 3 to 5 times a second. You're not aware of it. The input to your brain right now, if you just look at my face, the input to your brain is changing completely 3 to 5 times a second from your optic nerve. You're not even aware this is happening, but this is an integral part of how the brain works, how the neocortex works. And we made a real sort of important discovery this last year, exactly how it is that those changing patterns based on your own behavior lead to modeling the world as it actually is. How is it you learn the structure of the world through movement? And that's a key ingredient. It was a real breakthrough this last year.
It's a pretty critical part. I mean, I think most of the changes that are coming into our sensory organs are due to our own behavior, not because of the world changing. So being able to model that is a very critical part of it.
I'm so excited. It's a real breakthrough, so you're going to hear more about it over the coming years. But anyway, I digress from wherever we are.
Hopefully that gives you a feel for what we're doing. And how we're going about it and kind of the depth that we're going into it. And the key things, one is that neurons are more complex than it might seem at first, and it's important to model that. And the second part is that the brain is perhaps not as complex as everyone thinks, and there's a set of common principles, and by focusing on those common principles, we can really hope to make progress on that.
A little color to that. If you're trying to imagine a neuron, neurons are these complicated, they have somewhere around 10,000 connections on each cell. And what we've learned, I'll just share this with you. What we've learned is they're not like a mass group. It's not like some sort of mass thing that happens all at once. That individual neurons can learn hundreds of unique patterns and respond very precisely in hundreds of unique ways. Most people don't think about neurons like that. They think, it's getting some input and has an output. What we've learned is a neuron is very, very picky. And individual neurons will say, this pattern I've seen before, and that pattern I've seen before, and this pattern I've seen before. And it's a very precise way of working, even though the neurons themselves are kind of noisy. So anyway, just adding some. Just imagine this thing look like a tree with 10,000 connections on it. It's pretty incredible. And you've got about 30 billion of those in your neocortex. Anyway.
So I think you want to talk a little bit about the applications and the impact of what we're doing?
I think, there's a lot of, I already mentioned some of those impacts earlier. I think the one that's getting a lot of attention now is the whole idea of machine intelligence. And maybe it's worth exploring that a little bit. As you know, there's a lot of noise these days about AI, and most of what's happening in AI is not really intelligent. It's machine learning techniques. They're very good. They're powerful. They're very useful. We're not trying to say that that's not the case, but not even getting close to what most people say is AI is not even getting close to what it is that we do as humans, and how our flexibility and ability to learn about almost anything. We think what we're doing is the core of what really is going to be the future of machine intelligence. And it's very hard to know exactly how that's going to play out. We think that, first of all, machine intelligence is going to be built on the principles of the brain. That's one of our beliefs. It's not a commonly held belief today, but we're very confident in that. And that it allows us to build machines that are not at all like humans. The goal is not to build like human-like things. That's a mistake. The goal is to build machines that work on the same principles as the brain, but can be applied in other areas. I'll just give you one sort of very simple example. An intelligent system has to interact with its environment and discover the structure of its environment. That's what we do. We learn about the world through interaction with it, and we discover the structure. That's what science and what we do as societies. But you could build a machine that works on those same principles, that works at the nano level, it's discovering the structure of proteins and understanding how proteins fold. And it could be running the same principles, but in a very different time scales and very different sizes. It's going to have an impact as broadly as computers have had on our society in the last 70 years. And it's going to be as big as that. But don't think about it as robots running around and talking to you and taking over your job. That is not what this is about. Just like computers didn't do that, they aren't going to do that. But it's going to be amazing impact on our societies going forward. And it will transform the world in many exciting ways, which I'd be glad to talk about later.
Yeah, it may be worth maybe give sort of a historical perspective on AI and how it's evolved over the years as well.
Go for it.
Yeah. Okay, well, so you can kind of think of AI as being in kind of 3 different epochs. At least that's the way we kind of see it. There's sort of classic AI, what you might have learned about in school, and this was typically very hand-engineered. People would interview experts. They'd write down rules. There'd be sort of expert systems, and you'd create this big database of knowledge and if-then kind of rules. And that was, that has a lot of applications. That sort of AI is actually still around today. If heard of IBM Watson, that's basically that style of AI. We kind of call that AI 1.0. Then there's kind of the world, kind of the machine learning world that we're immersed in today. You might have heard of buzzwords like deep learning and so on. While the classic AI, the AI 1.0 guys were working, people started to figure out how to get machines to learn, how you can give it data and tune its parameters and get it to sort of recognize basic patterns. But this was all going on during the 80s, but they didn't have enough data and they didn't have enough compute power. But today, there's computers are way more powerful, and with the internet, there's data, tons of data available, and so the machine learning techniques are becoming a lot more popular and actually delivering huge amounts of value today. But the problem with those systems is that they're, as Jeff was mentioning, they're extremely brittle. You tend to train them on data, and even though you don't have these hand-engineered rules, they're still kind of recognizing the patterns that are in the data that you give it. And it's very passive and extremely brittle. So if you're aware of the DeepMind Go system, for example, they beat the world champion Go player, a feat that was thought was extremely difficult. But that system, even though it can beat the world's best Go player, can't actually play tic-tac-toe. You'd have to completely start from scratch in order to get it to play tic-tac-toe. So we think this is going to lead to AI 3.0, which is this biologically based intelligence.
Our work. Yeah.
And in order to really have flexible intelligence systems, you have to look at the neuroscience. You have to look at the only existence proof there is, and you have to understand those principles and be able to build models of that and build systems.
And today we have a pretty good list of what those principles are. Some of them we understand deeply, some of them we don't. But we can say for certain today, most of these AI systems aren't even remotely like an intelligent system. We make sure we're going to leave some room for some questions here. Do we have anything else we want to talk about before we do the questions? Maybe it's a little bit about our business.
Yeah,
this is like, we have a VC introducing us here and so on. We have a kind of unusual business model. We have to work, we're not a classic, Subutai and I both have worked at previous startups. I started Palm and Handspring, and he's worked in the vision space. But Numenta is a business, but we don't really have a product. And no VC would fund us. It's funny because they all come to us all the time, like, we're really excited what you're doing, and you say, no, you're not. You're not going to want to give us money. But it's interesting.
You have to be extremely patient.
We have to be really patient. I mean, we've been at this for 12 years so far, and we're going to be at it for quite a few more. Our business model is one of intellectual property. We have, for a small company, we have something like 35 issued patents. Some of them are very fundamental. And I know from my work in mobile computing that those things become really valuable later. Many of the patents I did when I was at Palm end up being extremely valuable, and a lot of litigation over many years later. So we kind of have a patient business model here. We're really focused on the science, and I think it'll pay off in the end run, but we're not focused on that now. But we do have some licensees already. Okay, we're gonna have a time for a few questions. Or is that 3 minutes left total, or is that 3 minutes plus 5 minutes for questions? It says
click to add notes.
Well, we have a clock up there that says 3.5 minutes. So, anyway, if there's questions, we'll take some. Do we have any questions? We have 3 minutes. Okay, who's the question person here? Who's going to tell us the questions? Right? Oh, they're on the screen.
No.
There are no questions. Well, There you go. Either people don't find it interesting or they couldn't figure out how to ask questions. One of those two. Which is it? It could be either. I would be really tempting to ask questions to the audience, but I've been told not to do that.
But I think if we don't have any questions on the screen, especially since this is our first
I see a
session.
hand raised over there. Can I take that? Am I going to
Yes.
get in trouble?
No, let's
I
take
will
it.
repeat the question.
Yeah, I can do that too.
In some of your writings, you've talked about pattern recognition being sort of the basis for machine intelligence. Can you talk about why you think that is and why other things could be left out?
Sure. So the question is, I've written in the past about how pattern recognition is the basis of machine intelligence, pattern recognition, and why do I think that is? Is that right? And why do actually, I'll be a little bit careful. I've written extensively about slightly different than that. I wrote a book called On Intelligence, which is that I don't think I've said pattern recognition. I said the brain is a prediction machine, and I focus on that, meaning you do recognize patterns, but the brain is what we call builds a predictive model of the world. So you have to recognize things, but you also, it's a predictive model, so it's constantly predicting what you're going to see, hear, and feel. So for example, when I reach my hand onto this chair, I have expectations what I'm going to feel when it touches the chair. And if those expectations weren't met, I would know it. Or if I put my foot on the floor, or if when I'm hearing Subutai speak, I'm constantly making predictions. So it's really, I guess I don't think I've said that it's pattern recognition. It's about pattern prediction. And that was a key insight I had many years ago, that the brain builds a predictive model of the world. And that has informed all of our research. Essentially, we're saying everything you sense all the time, you have a prediction about what it's going to be, what you're going to hear, what you're going to see, and what you're going to feel. You're not even aware of these predictions. And our models do this. Our models are essentially saying it's the way the brain tests the brain does a model of the world, and the way it tests that model is to say, I expect the following thing to happen. I expect to hear this, I expect to feel that. And the neurons are actually doing this. They're making these predictions. And that has informed all of our research. It's not just recognizing something, it's building a model of something so that in any situation you can make a prediction about what that is. If I understand what an electron is, then it behaves certain ways, and I have expectations about it. Anyway, so it's, I guess I don't think I said that, what you said. Maybe I did, but I'm going to pretend I didn't. And say that it was really about predictions. And that gave us a foundation for asking how it is that neural tissues actually makes predictions about the world based on its previous experience. That's been a good foundation. That's not all of it, but that's one of the pervasive properties. And that has allowed us to discover some of the really key things we've discovered over the years. I hope I answered your question.
I think we have no more questions on the screen right now, so we probably have time
I
for
have
one more.
another
Yeah,
hand
there's
raised
several
right there.
hands
We have
up.
a couple there. Well, who do we take? The one on the left or one on the right? The guy who's speaking up first. All right, he won, sorry.
Thanks for a very interesting overview. I work with a brain company as well. Should definitely talk. Our focus is on zeroing in on damage to neurons. We invest a lot in very advanced neuroimaging to figure out the location and severity of neural damage from things like head impacts. My question is, if we gave you that picture, here's the brain, here's where we think neurons are damaged, are your models to the point where you can tell us, okay, we can predict what type of symptoms might be?
Yeah. Do you want to take that or you want me to take that?
So,
Well, first,
so the question,
repeat the question.
Yeah, so the question is, you work on a brain company and making devices for knowing where damaged tissue is, and could our models tell you if there's damage somewhere, what the symptoms would be? Perhaps. One of the things we've definitely learned is that the brain is much more flexible than anyone thought, and it can recover from many amazing types of trauma. One of the things we don't do, though, is we don't really model precisely what the brain does. What we're focused on is understanding kind of the computational principles and the underlying functionality, and then we're trying to build new systems, intelligent systems that are based on that. So we're not really trying to address sort of medical scenarios
we do model what the brain does, but we don't model all the biological processes.
Yeah, not necessarily all of the details.
So,
that
for
we would
example,
need to do that.
neurons have something called myelin, which is a fatty sheath, and a lot of neural diseases have to do with the degradation of myelin. But that doesn't come into a theoretical point of view. And I think the right answer is well, it's the same answer you're giving, is we don't focus on neurologies or pathologies or trauma. Sometimes our research can inform that. For example, we're out of time. I'll give you one example about this. It was something I'm very proud of. When you have trauma to the brain, there's usually like either a point trauma, like you got hit or somebody shot you or something like that, or you had a stroke. What happens is over the ensuing about 4 months, you can recover a lot of that functionality. And a lot is known about that. And after about 4 months, it doesn't work so well anymore. We, in our models, can model that. We can model the recovery of trauma. We can literally model a sheet of tissues, and we can kill the neurons in some center. And we actually have videos of how the system responds, and we understand completely how it recovers, what it can recover. And it's really fascinating to watch. So we can model certain processes like that. But other trauma-related things, if there's like blood in the brain and it's just going to like destroy a bunch of nerve cells in some place we don't know where it is, we're not going to be able to do that. So we really, I like to say we study how healthy brains work, how it is that they function, and it can inform some pathologies and some neurological problems, but not all of them. So interesting question. I think we're out of time, so we're going to be giving the hook.
Thank you very much.
All right,
That was
thank you.
terrific,
Okay,
Jeff
thank you.
Subutai. Thank you.